Welcome to that Bible Guy. It's so wonderful to have you join me today. How can we deal with disputes in the church? Touches on a video I've done recently, and I've no doubt that if you're not having handled the dispute at the moment, you will in the future, or you maybe have in the past, or you may have heard about people having disputes, characters and people personalities falling out. And I'm sure even with myself, there's been moments where there's been disputes in the church. So even amongst God's people, we can still fall out about things and not see eye to eye. That can obviously build and be a very significant problem. I'm sure in some of our families, we all know people that have stopped speaking to each other many years ago, and you don't want to put them at the same table. This should not be the case for Christians, and it can be disturbing when we see that it is actually happening. So, how do we deal with disputes in the church? Well, you'll be glad to know that there is a brilliant and wonderful example that we're going to look at today from the scriptures of a dispute with the subsequent advice from Paul as he was guided along by the Holy Spirit as to how the people involved should respond to this dispute. What can they do? And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look in Philippians 4. I preached a sermon on this about a week ago. Philippians 4 and verse 2, it says, I plead with Euodia and Syntyche to agree, Syntyche, I looked up different pronunciations of that word, Syntyche, to agree with each other in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you, loyal yokefellow, help those women who have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers whose names are in the book of life. He goes on to say, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. I want to keep on reading on because the passage is so incredible. But just to go back to what this is actually all about, dealing with disputes in the church. We have two women here, Euodia and Syntyche. It really is a mouthful, Syntyche, who were not agreeing with each other. And there was a dispute going on. So what do we know about this dispute then? Well, we don't actually know that much. Actually, very little about what the dispute was about. But we can learn an awful lot from this small little passage here, this paragraph, about what Paul said about the dispute. I want to draw out a few things that we can learn from this. A fantastic example, despite not actually knowing. And do you know something? In a way, it's probably good that we don't know what the dispute was about. The first thing to say about this dispute is it was a significant dispute. Why do we say that? Well, Paul's written a letter to the entire church while in prison about this dispute, asked others to get involved, so it's a significant dispute that had ramifications for the unity of the church at Philippi. It was a public dispute. Paul had heard about this dispute while in prison at Rome and, as I say, felt the need to write this letter to the entire church. So everyone no doubt knew about this, and there may have been all kinds of potential divisions that were starting to arise because of this dispute. There were two issues, they couldn't agree on it. So it was a significant and a public dispute, and that's what we can see. Paul felt that this was urgent also because he says, I plead with you to agree. It wasn't like, I think it's a good idea if you guys agree, you really should try and work this out. I plead with you. Paul went to great lengths to urge them to try and agree on this. And we'll look at some more of the details in a moment. So it really was urgent. The third thing, and again, we'll look at what this all means for us in our current context in a moment, is to agree, but not just agree in the Lord. Paul was appealing, and we'll look at this in a moment, to the common ground that lay between these women and how that was actually more important. So not just agree, but agree in the Lord. And this is very significant. We'll come back to that in a minute. He then said, I ask you, loyal yokefellow, help these women. So this phrase, loyal yokefellow, you'll see at the bottom of your footnotes there, in verse 3, loyal Syntyche. It also means like, the word means like true companion, and it can refer to a single person or to a group of people. Regardless of that, you person, get involved here. Try and help these women. Help get it sorted out. The next thing we'd say about what Paul had written here is you see that Paul didn't take sides. So no doubt he knew about the issue. And you know something? He may very well have sided with one. We normally do, don't we? We side with one person over another. But Paul didn't take sides. It didn't matter what the dispute was about. And that's really important. He did not take sides. The next one we see is how does he describe these women who are having this significant, urgent, public dispute? Well, he describes them as faithful, who've contended at my side in the cause of the gospel. He describes them as fellow workers, faithful workers in the gospel. These were faithful women who were at his side to spread the gospel. So he was very positive about their role in the church. He then goes on to say, along with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. You're going to heaven. Your name's in the book of life. You contend with me at my side for the gospel. This is Paul's view of these women despite this dispute. Here's what he was able to say about these women despite the dispute. So just because there's a dispute going on, it doesn't mean he changed his view of these women at this particular time. Again, we'll look at what this means for us in a moment. You may have already had thoughts about that. He then says to them, and the rest of this, but we didn't read all of it, was rejoice in the Lord always. Let your gentleness be evident to all. So despite this dispute that's going on right now, we can still rejoice in the Lord. Despite our circumstances. Paul was in prison. The Lord is near. He also then goes on to say, gentleness evident to everyone. No, God is near. So even these women right now, let your gentleness be evident to everyone. Despite this dispute, despite the fact that somebody's coming at you or doesn't agree with you or they're making your life difficult, your gentleness should still be evident to everyone, including them, including the very people that you're in a dispute with. He then goes on to say, if you're anxious, the Lord is near, don't be anxious, but by everything by prayer and petition offer your requests to God with thanksgiving. So if you're anxious or your peace is disturbed because of this dispute, maybe you're the person involved in the dispute or these other people around them who were involved in the dispute, don't let your peace be disturbed. Seek God if you're anxious, and God will guard your heart. His peace will guard your heart and mind. Pray. He then goes on the last little bit. Again, we didn't read it, verse 8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So he then goes on to tell them, in the midst of this dispute, rejoice always, let your gentleness be evident to all, don't be anxious, pray, and this is how you should think. Think about these things. Don't fixate on the dispute necessarily and the negativity and the ramifications of it, but think about, in terms of the dispute, even in terms of the context of this passage, think about whatever's lovely, admirable, praiseworthy, all these things. Think about these things, whatever is noble. So that's a lot of the context to this dispute that we don't know anything about. There's still a lot said about something that we don't know what it was really about, and I actually think that's a good thing. What I just want to say then, what does that mean for us dealing with disputes in our church context with the family of believers? What does this mean for us? Well, I'm going to say there's 6 things today on the back of learning about Euodia and Syntyche. We will get there with that name. So the first thing is, I would say for us, is issues need to be sorted and urgently. So issues that rise up between you or someone else, between a group within the church, the issues need sorted out. They need raised, not swept under the carpet, and dealt with urgently. Unity is extremely valuable and needs to be pursued at all costs. So it's urgent, needs sorted out. The second thing I would say then is get other people involved. That's what Paul said here. My loyal yoke fellow, other people, help these women. Get others involved. Get other people in to help out, spiritually mature people. And as you do that, this is a key thing. You don't need to take sides. You don't need to have an opinion about who's more right and who's more wrong necessarily. If somebody's completely in the wrong, that may be different. But the dispute, in a sense, doesn't matter, really. Don't take sides, but people step in to help. Again, spiritually mature people, and don't take sides. The third thing then, my fingers are all over the place here. The third thing is, despite the dispute, stay faithful. You're still faithful, you're going to heaven. So even if there's a dispute going on in the church, people aren't agreeing, it doesn't mean that they're finally in God's eyes in the wrong place. They may still be, if their name written in the book of life. They still contend to the work of the gospel. They still serve the Lord. We can still be positive about people in the midst of a dispute and emphasize the positive parts of their Christian lives. Fourth thing then, the dispute, whatever it is, because of what Paul wrote here, shouldn't steal our peace. We should still be able to come across as gentle to everyone and at peace. And if we're not, we seek God for that peace, despite the dispute. And we obviously have to keep in mind, as far as it depends on the other person, because if someone else doesn't want to deal with it, that's a different situation. But again, as far as it depends on us, it shouldn't steal our peace. The fifth thing then, we're advised how to think about the dispute. Paul goes on to say, this is what I want you to think about. So we've talked about a dispute. It needs to be sorted, but this is what I want you to think about. So this is a way to think whilst the dispute's ongoing. We've had disputes recently, maybe even in our UK churches. How can I think? What can I bring to the table in the midst of that dispute? Well, whatever's noble, true, praiseworthy, whatever's excellent, whatever's admirable. These are the ways I can think, and these are the ways I need to think in the midst of an ongoing dispute. Here's the last one and the most important for me, and what I emphasized in the sermon last week about these two women. They were asked to agree, but agree in the Lord. Not just agree in their own terms, but agree in the Lord. In other words, there's a common ground. What binds them is greater than what separates them, and this is absolutely critical. It doesn't matter what the dispute is about. If it doesn't involve salvation type doctrine or humongous issues like that, which it most often doesn't, then what binds them together, what keeps them together, what the common ground is much greater than what separates them. Whatever that issue is, it's small in comparison to the fact that they both seek the Lord, they're both in the Lord, they both contend to the work of the gospel, they're both fellow Christians in God's family. This is much, much greater than what separates them, whatever that issue is. And if that's the thing that they focus on, then this dispute can be sorted out. It is possible to agree in the Lord. As I say, as long as it's not like the key salvation doctrine, it is possible to agree in the Lord. And we see this with these two women here. Paul's saying, in the Lord, it's possible to agree. So just a recap. Issues need sorted and urgently. We need to maybe get others involved as they don't take sides necessarily. Despite the dispute, we can still be faithful and emphasize the good in the person involved. It shouldn't necessarily steal our peace or stop us rejoicing or coming across as gentle and at peace. The Bible advises us how to think when there's a dispute ongoing. But the key thing to say is what binds us together is greater than what separates us, no matter what that dispute generally is. And we can agree in the Lord. I know there's things going on around our family of churches at the moment. I know there always has been to some extent, and there always will be to some extent. But what binds us together is greater than what separates us. And a lot of this is very helpful for us personally, as we may have to deal with disputes. Let me know what you think of this today. Please drop a like. Please share it on to help other people. Please subscribe to That Bible Guy, and let's get his word out there.